Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is 10:38, February 19th. Hope everyone's doing good. Got some music shows coming up this weekend. Tomorrow, I'm going to be playing with. It's a band that I've like filled in a lot with over the years. The Midnight Riders, headed by Will Niels, who's a local rock star, and his band is playing tomorrow at the Bayside Bowl in Portland, which I've never been to. So I'm kind of excited and definitely interested in checking the venue out. I've never been there. They have a lot of shows there all the time. Some pretty big names, some pretty big reggae bands. Legendary reggae bands have played there. Fishbone played there once last year, so but I'm playing with the Midnight Riders. We're gonna play, I think, like a 45-minute set, and there's a bunch of bands playing, and it's for this new organization that just started called Rock Against Racism, and I think it starts at 7 o'clock tomorrow at the Bayside Bowl in Portland, Maine. So yeah, it's for a great cause. So come on by. There's a bunch of great music, a bunch of bands playing. Random Ideas is playing. Roots Rhythm and Dub. David Gutter, who's won a couple of Grammys, he's going to be performing. So it should be fun. Sea Peoples, I think, are playing. Sparks is going to be playing. So yeah, come on by if you're in Portland. And I'm going to be playing drums with Midnight Riders, so it should be fun. And on Saturday, which I'm really excited about, we're I got another Quantum show coming up with my great friend Halsey. We're going to be playing at Hey Sailor Saturday night at 7 o'clock. So come on by, and great venue. Been really fortunate to play a ton of gigs there over the last couple of years with my band Quantum. So really great space. So some fun things happening. Anyway, today's show is, I guess. I guess before I start, I should say maybe put in a little bit of a disclaimer. This is a subject that's really new for me, and still like I'm still trying to process it and understand it. So I'm definitely not like a specialist, or not that I'm a specialist in anything, but uh, I figured like I've been doing a lot of research about it as of the last couple of weeks, and I've been like looking up a lot of interviews around the subject, um, with people in the creative world of making music, especially with electronic music, um, various things that can be used, and also I've been probably the first thing that I did check out quite a bit is as far as this new thing that's happening is through movies, and that is basically AI technology. And again, I've just started to kind of, do a lot of research to kind of understand it. Um, I didn't really know a thing. Not that I know a thing now about it. I'm still understanding it, but I think I'm at a point now where I've been reading a lot about it, looking at it from different angles. Again, looking at it, the first time I kind of checked out some information about it was in regards to the film world, and then lately I've been doing a lot of some deeper diving on electronic music, like how electronic music can be created through these AI, apps and platforms. Also, like how it is being used for pop music. I personally don't have. I've never used AI myself. I have been around it. Um, I know someone who showed me um, some of the software, Chat GPA or Chat GPT or something like that. Probably have the name wrong. Um, and also, just various things around it. and so I kind of, and I feel like I've kind of got a gist of it right now, to where I can. It's definitely given me some space to kind of think about this whole new age that we're in when it comes to AI technology, and then also, I kind of feel like it's, again, I'm still trying to learn about it. Um, but I think I'm at a point where I'm able to form pretty strong opinions around it. So I kind of wanted to do a show about this subject of AI technology, particularly in film and without a doubt when it comes to making music, and kind of how I, you know, been, trying to understand a lot of these new things. Like anything in tech with technology, technology is always, moving at such an exponential rate that you can't keep. It's hard to keep up with it. Everything gets upgraded constantly, and technology, for good or bad, is always increasing with the quality of what it can do. Um, so it's so going back. So I kind of wanted to talk about it, and so it's a little bit of a rant, I guess, too. But the first time I ever came across, or even I guess you could say the first time I ever like encountered AI, or the first time I ever heard of it, was actually at school, or where I work at Montessori. I've been working at the Montessori school for about 3 years, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place to work. I've been really fortunate to have been there for as long as I've been, 3 years, and I work with the little kids there. I'm part of the aftercare system. I'm not a teacher there, but I'm a staff member, so I basically hang out with the kids. Um, but the first time I ever heard of AI was about just about 2 years ago. I didn't know anything about it until I had this experience. And so what had happened was, I came into work, regular day, and there were a group of teachers standing around in the office area, and they were talking about uh, these tests. One teacher in particular was talking about these tests that they had given, and they got, the kids, did these tests, and then turned them in. And one of the teachers was saying that she felt that one of the papers that this one particular kid had written was AI generated, and that it was basically a fabrication, and that this kid actually did not really do any of the work, and he used some kind of AI program to create this paper. Um, and that was the first time I had ever heard of it. And I was kind of like, what is that? What is that about? And so, and fast forward back, I should go back a little bit more. Um, but the very first time I ever heard of AI, going back quite a few years, I remember the first time I ever heard about AI was a writer and a scientist that I had seen some interviews with, Ray Kurzweil, who is a leading um, futurist, and he worked a lot in tech, and he was using. I remember seeing some interviews with him where he was talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and this was like quite a few years ago, maybe 15 years ago or so, and he was talking about, in these various lectures that I would see, that I would check out. He would talk about this term called singularity, and it was kind of this emergence of artificial intelligence, basically becoming part of our society. And he was known to be like a futurist, um, and kind of that whole thing of like this emergence of this new technology, mostly centered around AI. And this was about 15, maybe even 20 years ago. And I remember there was a Rolling Stone interview with him, and that's the first time I ever heard about this technology, like becoming, It was really at its hadn't even really started. It was really at its infant stages at that point. Nothing was available yet to the public, and he made these predictions that basically like things would change like dramatically by like 2099. And here we are in 2096, and arguably you could say, well, it's kind of ahead. I think technology is probably a little bit, that technology, AI technology, is ahead, uh, has come quicker than what he predicted. But really prophetic and kind of unsettling and very strange. So, anyway, so fast forward to 2 years ago, this teacher was saying she made these claims that she felt that this paper, this assignment, this test that was turned in by one of her kids was not really written by the kid, and that he had some major assistance through some kind of AI programming. And I remember that was the first time I had ever heard of it in like I guess real life terms or like in a real life scenario. And I was just like, wow, what is that? And so I remember all the other teachers were discussing it, and I was not a part of the conversation, but I remember just kind of being on the outskirts. And they were, trying to verify if this work was, made by the kid, made by this particular student, or was it completely AI generated? It was really interesting. And then, after that, and that was like 2 years ago, I had heard, a few things more of those kinds of situations coming up. And I'd see little stories, blurps of it here and there. And then here we are now where it's like, now it's this AI technology is kind of everywhere. So I had been hearing a lot about all of these things. And then I kept hearing more and more things about AI tech stuff, in regards to film. That's kind of where it started. And then recently, trying to kind of comprehend it a little bit more and try to understand it a little bit more. And so I think like there's always been, obviously when technology grows, like once technology is created, I mean, you can't stop it. You can't really, you know, throw your hands up and say it's evil and bad, and then you're gonna like take it and put it in a box and throw it in your closet, and then you'll never see it again. Like that's not a possibility because technology is, that's kind of how we. I mean, this is technology is like how I'm communicating this show, and really the only way I can do this show. And so it's impossible. We're at a point and have been at a point for a long time. Like technology is going to grow, and because there's a demand for it, and it does to some to some degree, in a lot of great ways, does make the sharing of information easier. So, and you can acquire more tools that way to express yourself, or to say even promote your band or promote your film. I mean, or the technology used to make your records or to make your films. I mean, it's an endless amount of things that it does provide. And so the technologies, whatever it is, it's going to always grow. But there's always been, obviously, there's always a fraction of people who are moving and shaking with it. They have this, kind of futurist um, vision of trying to utilize it and to try to wholeheartedly adapt it. And then you have people who are, very resistant to it, and they kind of portray it in a really negative light, and that it's going to, cause a lot of harm. It's going to replace people, basically. It's going to replace people's jobs and all of these things. So there's always, it's always moving forward, but then there's always a path of like where there's always a resistance to it, and there's always arguments on along the way on the pros and cons of this new technology. And I remember, hearing about, and that those predicaments or that predicament isn't anything new. That's like been around forever. Ever since you know, I mean, ever since computers became a part of our life, our lives, or technology did. So you can trace this back for years. But the first time I ever became aware of where there was like a general, somewhat outrage against it, but then also people were really, jumping and you know jumping on that bandwagon and trying to utilize that technology. First time I ever heard about it was auto tune. Auto tune came out many, many, many years ago, maybe in the late '90s or so. And auto tune was kind of this new technology that basically was a some form of like vocal enhancer, where basically you could manipulate the human voice and change it, alter it, and basically, artificially to a degree, create it or use it in a way to enhance the human voice or to change or alter the human voice. And I remember that was a big thing when it came out. And then there was a lot of, well, a lot of hip hop artists were starting to use it. A lot of pop artists were using it. And initially, it was this big new technology. And there was also at the same time where it was becoming this very, this new thing. Um, and also it was becoming really popular. There was also this big resistance, that basically, well, it's not, you're going to take away the vocal performance. You're taking away the jobs of singers. It's not really someone singing anymore. It's all artificially enhanced. It's not an organic voice anymore. And there was at one point a fear that this was going to replace the say more or less the singer's role in a band or in a group or pop music. And it was being used, auto tune was being used all the time, especially in pop music at that time. And this went on for a while. The technology got stronger and better, and people were embracing it. But I think at the end of the day, autotune, that new kind of emerging technology, never really it didn't replace singers. Like, singers are still doing their thing. It never replaced the human voice. And I think what's happened, over the years, and this was like quite a few years ago, people adapted it as a tool. Some people probably used it to the point of where it got a bad reputation, because it was maybe overly used for certain things, and it gave the music this very processed, kind of sound. But I think what ended up happening was people just ended up acquiring it and using it as a tool, kind of at their disposal. But it's I think it's safe to say that it never replaced the role of a singer in the band, whether it's a band or a pop singer or what have you. It's just kind of been adapted, and it's still a thing, and it's just kind of been adapted as a tool or a color that an artist can use. um, and then going back even further, in the '80s, in the jazz world, and then the fusion world, um, and and particularly in the '80s, like the emergence of the drum machine. Drum machines started coming out. There were a lot of drummers and musicians that I love. Made an incredible living playing on all kinds of records. Everything from it could be Miles Davis to Paul Simon to Steely Dan. I mean, just all of these great recordings that were coming out in the '70s and '80s. But in the '80s, there was this new kind of technology that was being brought out, and the use of like drum machines and early stages of like triggers, which were essentially processed drums, you know digital drums more or less. And there was a period of time where a lot of producers, at one point, a lot of musicians, and in this case drummers, were doing all of this session work and sometimes making their whole living off of doing, session work and musicians in general, but especially around drummers, where it definitely was a bigger thing. They were, these drummers were making a living. They were being making their living off of it. They were being hired from, numerous sessions. People like Steve Jordan, Steve Gadd, Vinny Colaiuta, being a hired gun for all of these recording sessions. And then this new technology came in, and slowly some of these producers that were working on some of these recordings were using these drum samples or drum machines to essentially more or less replace the live drummer in a lot of recordings. So you can listen and hear back to, like, when you listen to music in the 70s, records that came out in the 70s, 90, pretty much 100%, those performances were all performed by actual musicians. And then you can hear, in the 80s there was a period where you can start hearing the drum machines being put in on various recordings, and there were, to a degree, it was, there were less live drums per se on even pop recordings. And so when that came out and that was a thing, there was an embrace of this new tech, and people, producers and in the industry were embracing this new technology as this new tool. But then there was also this big backlash of, well, you're replacing human beings. And and I think, like, when that whole period happened, I think it kind of came back. There were cases, I think, where it did cost people jobs, musicians jobs, in this case drummers. But I think it did kind of come back. And I think at the end of the day, it might have been a little bit more of where it actually did have a little bit more of a negative effect than, say, the auto tune kind of situation where people actually kind of lost their jobs and it did alter music. But I think, we live in a society, in a world where things kind of cycle back all the time. Things are tried and tested, and you hear it all the time where people say, well, there's not really any new ideas. It's just kind of, recycling and things that, like, kind of just come back and forth all the time. And that's kind of the case, I think, with what happened with that technology around drum machines. Like, it kind of did go away and then it kind of came back, and now it's used as a tool, like, as far as drum machines go. And there's a combination of those things. And I think now there is more of a combination of those things, and it's used as more as a tool. The main thing that's put, some musicians out of business is kind of the more or less the collapse of the industry itself, and that's kind of an entirely different thing. But it kind of followed the same trajectory, that whole predicament, as I think autotune at the end of the day, where it just kind of cycled back, and now it's used as a tool, and it's gotten better. It's never stopped growing. So fast forward to the AI thing. So I had all these little encounters with it, um, and then I had a friend over fairly recently, and she was talking about this letter that she was going to be writing, and she showed me this AI tech app that she had, Chat, I think it's called. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, and it was pretty wild. Like, she was trying to write this letter, and she was able to compose it in a few seconds. Basically, you go on this website and you go to the search engine and you basically say what this letter is for, and that's it. And then it will come right back at you through this AI computer, uh, with the letter printed, and then you could, if you want to change the tone, specific things, uh, what have you, little detailed things, you just basically type that into the search engine again, and it just gives you back what you want, or what you want, and you basically handpick from that, and you can use that. And that was wild, because it was like, wow, why? My first reaction was, wow, you literally do not have to ever formally send an email again, or, I mean, nobody writes letters anymore, but you don't actually have to if you're posting online somewhere about something, or writing a short story and you want to post it somewhere or try to self-publish your stuff, literally I felt like, well, you don't actually have to um, do it yourself anymore. It was like, wow, my first reaction was like, this is fucking crazy. And that was kind of my first little mini, interaction with it. As of the last few days or last couple weeks, like I said, I wanted to kind of like find out more and more about how this AI stuff is being used to create music, especially with music that I, more or less in the style of music that I compose, like for my band Quantum. So I wanted to see like what this entails around, composing electronic music. And so the one of the first uh, apps or programs I looked up, and it's a real popular one, and it's called Suno, and it's a AI app that you can get or use, and it's a real, I guess, popular one, and I guess it's relatively user friendly. So I looked. That was the first one I looked up and checked out, and then I looked into some of the other programs, AI programs for making music, composing music, and producing music. Some of the more advanced systems that are out there, and I was, God, I was the only way I can kind of describe it after like checking this stuff out is I'm just like I'm completely fucking dumbfounded. I just there's some things that I've been learning around this AI technology stuff where I am just like kind of rendered speechless on how to react to it. And that some of these things that would, you know, you when you think about where people are giving these arguments about around the great um, aspects of AI, and I think of there are lots of people saying these things that are very much embracing the technology, um, and that they're having these conversations, right out in the open, and these things that are accepted or even you know looked into as being something serious. When I think of like, wow, like that conversation where this would be this accepted thing, like 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, it would have been like shut down. It would have been unheard of that like this would even be a thing that you could like, really get behind and approve of. And I'm like, holy fuck. Just the other day, getting back to movies, I saw a podcast, and it's a YouTube channel that I like a lot. And there was a guy, some kind of company, AI program, that put up this video. Basically, it was like a demo of what AI technology can do, and it was basically an action sequence, a movie action sequence that this AI program created, and it was basically a fight scene between Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt on a rooftop. And they used this company used this as like more or less as a demo to show what this technology can do. And I watched it, and it to me it looks weird. It just doesn't look it to me it just looks so artificial. But there are certain aspects of it to where at a glance it looks pretty real. And I know it's growing at such an exponential rate. But in this show, some of the people that were talking about this were legitimizing this and justifying it. Okay, well, if you're a filmmaker and you don't have the budget or that you need or want, or this could be this viable thing that creating these artificial avatars and putting them as putting these avatars in an artificial environment is actually something that is positive and that you can actually do for films. And I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck is wrong with us? Like, I couldn't believe it. So clearly, in that case, you're replacing humans, and that this is going to be um, this like widely accepted new kind of status quo I'm just like, I'm dumbfounded because it's not like even a question of, well, you're actually replacing human beings for Christ's sakes, and the actual art of acting and fight choreography, the blood, sweat, and tears that go into creating something that is memorable and that has an organic nature to it, which this AI stuff is not doing at all. And I know it's growing, but I can't believe that like that notion is like accepted now by people, even by people who are critics of it and are warning, have some reservations against it, or even by people who don't really want it to be a thing, but it's accepted. And then there was a show I watched a few weeks ago, the Red Letter Media, which is a really great movie channel. And one of the guys on there was talking about a movie he came across that was his foreign movie that he saw a trailer for it and he thought it looked pretty cool and kind of interesting. So he paid for it, paid a couple dollars, and watched it online and got into the movie and realized, wait, there's some things that are really weird about this movie, and came to realize that there were a lot of scenes of where when the characters, it's a big action movie, but when there's these kind of more quieter scenes with the characters talking, that everything seemed so artificial, and the way the physicality of the characters moved, the dialogue, all of this stuff was really off. And then he did some research and found out that all of those scenes were basically AI. And this was a film that was released worldwide. And there were whole scenes in this film that were completely artificially um, completed and created. And there were real actors in it. There were real set pieces, but in the midst of a lot of it was completely artificial. And I was just like, oh my god, like this is crazy. Like this isn't just like um, using this technology as a tool. It's replacing um, the presence of a human experience, like completely. And I had never seen that before. Just totally wild, totally wild. And I know like the technology, in the next few years is going to grow so quickly that it could be next to impossible as a viewer to see the difference or to comprehend what's going on. I mean, it's insane. It's completely insane. The AI videos or things like that I have seen, there's times where I can't really tell what's going on, but after a few minutes, looking into it a little bit deeper, I'm like, something's really off here. And I've had that experience with music that I've come across that is all AI based, and the same thing. But I know that line is going to be, blurred more and more, and as the technology gets more powerful, and it's going to be harder, much harder to uh, see that anymore. And this isn't the case of auto tune. This isn't the case of like the drum machines that emerged in the '80s, because those things kind of worked themselves out, and it was a little bit of a rocky road, but it ultimately became a tool. But these things are not really these new technologies aren't really about as aren't really I don't really see how they're being used as a as a um, as a tool. I see they're literally going into creating a whole new experience that was created by uh, human beings, and in all forms of creativity, and it is essentially replacing all of those things to a degree. And again, when I was talking about that demo video that an AI company put out with the fight sequence with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, who really wasn't them. Now that is being accepted as this new status quo of like, well, that's it's a tool now that because like say in the film world, filmmakers can use it because it's a little bit cheaper or they can be more creative with it or but they're not they're actually I mean it's it's really just replacing the whole experience and also misleading to the public because um, that film example that I talked about that I saw a show on with through Red Letter Media, there was no indication that this was going to be AI generated. It was sold as an action movie. Um, so I've been doing research on when it comes to music, especially when it comes to electronic music. And I'm sure you could use this for any style, but being that that's mostly what I, that's kind of my world of what I spend most of my time doing when it comes to music. I was really, really curious. So one of the basic companies, and it's a pretty standard company. It's probably the most popular company that I did some research in is Suno, and Suno is kind of like a real popular. It's probably the most popular AI program right now. Most people get it. Most people who are having interest are using that. Um, and then I did some research on other programs that people are using for bigger projects. For putting out records and putting out whole albums and creating a whole catalog of music. Um, and it's wild. It's wild. The first time I ever used, for me, the first time I ever like used computers, I guess, to compose music was back in the days of GarageBand. Many many years ago. And basically, GarageBand. I'm sure everybody knows what GarageBand is, but basically, you like, you go onto the site and it's got, you're working with all these preset sounds, preset drums, preset keyboards, preset percussion, what have you. And you can, and GarageBand's a really cool tool in a lot of ways because you can kind of, I've used it before, and again, there was a period where I used it a lot, and I hadn't really ever, I hadn't really had any experience composing music before. And so I remember working on GarageBand for a while, and it helped kind of get me going as far as like thinking of like structure and maybe how I can write a song and all these things. But it's not a platform or a resource that you're gonna like you're not gonna record and write a whole album using GarageBand and release it because it's not you. You're strictly using all these presets. And basically what you do, you go in and you like click on all these different things, these different sounds, and you find something that sounds kind of cool or interesting to you, and then you just cut it up and arrange it, and that's it. And you can go in different directions. You want a song that has more of a darker sound, or you want a song that's like more of a funkier song or whatever, and you want to create a punk song, and you basically just cut and paste. But the actual parts, the melody, the keyboard parts or bass part, all of that stuff is obviously they're all presets. They're all digital, and they're all manufactured for you. So I mean, really, at the end of the day, a monkey could like sit there and assemble these things together and make something that's like somewhat decent. I mean, and but it was again, it's a good tool that that's to kind of get your brain working, thinking about like composition, and like rhythm and how you could put together a chorus, all those things. But that's really it. It's just a fun tool, and it's kind of a fun thing to just kind of dick around with. But other than that, it's not something you're going to use like record like come up with 6 songs on your GarageBand program. And this is going back. I'm dating myself, but like recording songs that you have on GarageBand, recording them and saying, "Hey guys, check this out. This is my demo tape or this is my album." Like, no, it's that's just like it's not really music. It's just like a it's a tool like a practice exercise. It's not music. Um, and so I did some research with, and kind of I guess it's kind of equivalent to GarageBand. Is Suno. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, Suno. And again, I just I've been just kind of learning about some of this stuff, so it's still really new. But from what I gather, like Suno is kind of like everyday man's or everyday woman's, kind of like AI program that everybody can have now, and a lot of people are using it. And it's kind of equivalent to like I guess what like GarageBand was back in the day, because I remember when GarageBand came out, anybody who was kind of a musician or had an interest in it was using it because it was like it was fun, it was different. You could come up with some cool ideas to a degree, and I think Suno is kind of like that. Is the same thing for AI. And after Suno, you can like if you wanted to take a deep dive, there's all kinds of software out there now that have a bigger selection of sounds and different things that you can do. Where and these other programs are things that people are actually using to record music and albums and to all these things. And the same thing you could say with GarageBand. Like Fruit Loops was another one. There are other things that are very similar to that, but it had more capability that people would eventually use for music. Even for me, like I don't use it anymore, but there was a little bit of a time for like a couple of songs that I had written where I was actually using a couple of loops or samples from Fruit Loops, and I was like chopping them up and doing all these things to them to give them kind of their own sound. And I used them, years ago for a couple of Quantum songs, and then I eventually kind of got, you know, stopped using it. But so I did some research, and basically, you log on Suno, for instance, you log on like a website, you log on, and there's a giant search engine, and I looked one up. The first couple of things that I looked up were basically how to make like say you want to make a trance dance song, like say Paul Oakenfold. So that was the first thing I looked up. So you go into the website, you log on, and you get a bunch of displays of various sounds, and this is Suno, the website, the AI program, and there's a search engine, and you basically like the one thing I looked into was like I was curious to see how can if you have this program, how do you compose, or how would one compose say trance music, and that was the first thing I looked up. And basically the guy like did a little video on like a little tutorial on how to use this new website, this new AI website, and he was like saying, well, there's a search engine, and he's basically was like saying, well, he basically typed in the search engine saying, I would like to more or less create um, trance music that was, say popular in England in 1991. Um, Go, and just as a general thing. And so you type that in the search engine, and then it comes back at you with 10,000, different options of what the AI is registering to be that sound. And then suddenly there's like a plethora of trance music songs that this AI has created in the moment based on what you're saying, more or less. And then so you get that back, and you listen to them, you go through them, and then you like say you listen to the track and you're like, oh, okay, I like this keyboard sound, or I like this drum sound, but the bass sound is really bad. Then you go back through the search engine process again, type it in, saying I want the bass sound to say sound like, for instance, I want the bass to sound a lot like Joy Division or the New Order. and then you'll get it back again with the track, and then the bass is moved to that. And it was just a series, at least on this website, it was a series of just using the search engine and telling the computer what you want it to sound like, and then it sends it back to you, and then you basically pick from those ideas that the computer sends back to you as far as what it um, what it feels is trance music. And then the other example I saw was the guy wanted to put some vocals on the track. So he basically did this search of, um, in the back to the search engine where he basically said, okay, I want to add vocals that and catchphrases that were popular in early UK trance music in the early 90s. So then that comes back to you. And basically that was the whole process. And then he basically assembles those two or three ideas or four ideas and assembles it, and bam, he's got a track. And then so after that, I looked up other uh, software programs that are doing electronic music for AI, and it basically kind of worked the same way from what I gathered. Basically, you go onto the site, you log in, you get a password and all that stuff. You log on to the site, um, and you it does the same things, but obviously even more capability and more options. And you're using the you go on to the to you type, like say you want. In this other example, there was another example I watched with this guy who was using this more advanced AI program for computer music or electronic music. And the guy had like basically typed in, I want to create a song that is, I don't know, 1980s dark wave inspired. And then bam, he gets that back. And then there's like a myriad of choices. He listens to the track. And it was basically the same kind of thing. And just kind of goes from there. He wants to add a guitar part. And he basically uses the search engine. Um, and then if it comes to like the other thing that was just wild was like if you wanted to use a track that had like samples, like like how a lot of hip hop artists would use or electronic artists, like a drum sample from like 1970. You could type that into this website to the search engine, and it will give you back probably a million options of different samples that are out there to the public, and it will actually list on how many times those things have been sampled. So as a creator of this thing, even though you're not really creating anything, you can like, oh, I want to use this like really obscure drum fill because it only has 50 it's only been sampled 50 times compared to this other drum groove uh, sample that's been used a million times. So you can go into such detail with all those things, but basically you get all of this information from the AI search engine, and you take it from there and you assemble the music. Essentially, kind of like how, from what I gather, essentially it's like how GarageBand works or worked. And I was just like, my first reaction was just like, is it just me or is this like completely fucking insane? Like completely fucking insane. And I have to say, even the music that I heard that was coming back through these examples of what this AI was generating, like of trance music or whatever, I thought the music all sounded super weird, and it sounded really shitty. Like to me, it just felt so um, void of any kind of emotion, and it just felt like there was this like cold vibe to whatever it was, and it had this callous vibe. Like there was nothing organic about it, and it was a very like. And the other thing too was like if you're typing in different ideas, you get like say that trance track or idea back, and you want to, um, maybe I don't know, do something different and throw horns on it. The computer, the AI program doesn't know how, like, doesn't understand certain things around, like the computer software. The AI program doesn't understand like what that means, and how it correlates. So the music comes back even more fucked up, but not in a good way. And I know all that stuff is changing, but my first reaction between seeing some of this technology with AI music creation, and then when I started talking about the movie scenarios with these, the Brad Pitt and the Tom Cruise fight scene, and then this other movie, this action movie, I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, are you serious? Like, I don't see like people using these things as a tool. Um, these things are being used to create like fully realized products. Um, and I'm like, wow, this is like some crazy fucking Terminator shit. Like, that was my first reaction. And I know my first reaction to all of this stuff was well, kind of horrified and shocked in disbelief, and I still am. And I know at the same time I'm not gonna be, I can't, be a person of saying, I mean, I don't really have any ground to stand on around it, but I don't have any clout. But I I could be that person saying, well, don't use AI, and it's evil, it's bad, it's going to be the end of our civilization. Because no matter what I say or do, it's going to grow to where it's going to go. It's like you can't stop it because there's a demand for it, and it is literally taking on a life of its own. So there's no way that it's going to go away. It's just going to become more integrated into how we are as people, um, and how we interact with the world, and how we create. Even though, for me, um, this has nothing to do with creation. I mean, this is about, um, I really feel it's a way of creating something incredibly fast, and with no time involved, and getting that final product. Like, here's the thought, here's the somewhat of the canvas, there's the idea, there's the product. I don't really like when I think of like, and it's different. Like, I mean, mentioning this kind of technology in the same breath as like what I was talking about with GarageBand is like kind of utterly ridiculous, because that's like, in comparison, that's like something out of the medieval ages now. But um, so it almost is something you can't even say in the same paragraph or sentence. But when I think about, um, that's the process of how you can create music. This isn't something that is necessarily being used to as a tool. Like, people are actually, um, using this as to release fully realized products, music. Um, and it goes for anything in the arts. You know, and some people that are all for this are saying, well, it's still, you still have to interact with it as a human being, and it still comes from that knowledge and what you kind of want, and that the AI is assisting you. But that process of like the search engine scenario, it's not. I feel like it's actually, it's just, it's doing all of that thinking, and throwing out all of those options completely for you, and you just are a kind of a passive person, and you just, it's like this passive interaction, and then you're given these options, and then you just literally click or sort through them, because it comes close to what you had in your mind. It's wild. It's fucking crazy. And just to think that that is now, for many people, that that's a viable way to kind of create music. I'm all about using things to assist you or to make maybe things a little bit more efficient or what have you. I mean, you think of film. When it comes to when now there's only probably a handful of directors that actually shoot on film, but everything else is digital, and that becomes a thing because of the efficiency. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper. So I understand that, but it's never like film hasn't gone completely away, even though it kind of has. So I understand that that's what it's a that is probably the biggest allure is that it's maybe cheaper, but the efficiency and it takes a lot less time. And again, it's going to grow and grow and grow where it's going to be harder to tell the difference. But I think of like when you have a song, like somebody who's like a songwriter, you know, everybody's got a different process of how they're writing a song. But when you think of like the idea of kind of creation, where a person might be a creative person might be just sitting on their couch or sitting on their porch with a cup of coffee, and they decide to sit at the keyboard or sit down with their acoustic guitar or sit behind their drums, and they are creating something, just playing, and then some kind of melody comes to them, something that kind of like piques their interest, and maybe that is like where this kind of that seed for that idea is dropped, and then from there, maybe or maybe not, is where the song, usually that is where the song comes from, and then it bears fruit, and then you have the song, and there's that process of trying different things, but it's actually that person sitting there, um, using their mind and body and their experience, and a culmination of like product of who they are, their state of mind, creating these ideas, things that they listen to, things that they're inspired by, but it's coming from a living, breathing person, um, and it's that organic process of how you craft a song or how you write a song. Um, and I just it unless I'm completely delusional and completely wrong, I can't even understand or fathom on how these new methods are being justified. You know, I think when you look at anybody in the arts, the whole like notion of standing on the shoulder of giants. Like you know, being a drummer, for instance, like drummers that are my favorite players, like I look at them as being gods. It's like the whole idea of like standing on the shoulder of giants. Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, and Mike Clark. Or if you're a piano player, you know, McCoy Tyner or um, Herbie Hancock. I mean, the list is endless, and you have your people that you look up to, and there's that idea, like the essence of like a computer and AI generation. Some kind of generational computer like that came out in 2026. That that is something that would I don't think could ever be a part of that um, program, as far as where it's going to create something like that's impossible. Like that would be even I think even with technology, which it will, grows and grows and grows to an astronomical rate. I don't think just that example would be something a software or computer program could ever generate, or could ever replicate, because it doesn't have that connective tissue, that time frame. And I can't understand that. Like, yeah, I'm all about things moving along, and again with technology. I mean, people in the arts, all we do, because I love movies so much and I love music so much, a big part of I feel like what I do is like, always seeking out cool things, um, and taking in media, but I'm also like the way I'm getting that material and the technology around it is always growing and always adapting. And I know I'm not going to stop it, and nor you mean necessarily should I, but I realize it's there, and I feel like I'm always trying to figure out how to adapt to kind of what's going on, you know, um, because you're not going to stop it, I mean, just like a little example of that would be like my movie buying. Like I mostly buy Blu-rays. I'm a big fan of Blu-rays, and I know with like 4K technology, it's really really insane. And I'm not, and I don't have. I started saying about like 4K, and then I can't remember what it's called, but there is some other newer technology around films that is a little bit more advanced past 4K. And I've just heard a few things about it, but I can't remember what it was called. But like in that regard, it's like that's a new technology that's grown exponentially, and it's still growing and growing, and it's new, and it's created in this way that is like, well, we're gonna, we want to by these various companies to we want to. It's all consumer driven, but it's all about how we can make things better and easier, more proficient, and have a more enjoyable experience. Because that's what we crave as people, and that can be, you know, um, could be looked at negative in a negative light or a positive light, probably mostly positive, but that's just just a normal thing that we kind of want. But like in instance for movies, it's like I started off buying DVDs, and then it took me a while to jump on board for Blu-rays, and then now I really love Blu-rays, and that's pretty much mainly what I buy. Um, and 4K, it's like I have seen a little bit. I've seen a few films on 4K, and it's amazing. Um, and then I've also heard that like it's not really any better necessarily of an experience. Some ways it is, and the thing that is preventing me from going to jump on the 4K bandwagon is because I kind of already have like that means I'm gonna have to buy another version of the same film that I own already, and it's like that's kind of crazy. But I'm not saying 4K go away, 4K bad, don't buy 4K. I mean because it's gonna keep growing either way, and I feel like you kind of have to do that. But for me, with the AI thing, again, I'm not going to be a person that's going to say you need to unplug it and not, you know. But I do feel like it's a whole different thing. I think it's completely surreal and just completely insane and absurd to hear what the narrative is on the use of this technology and kind of the acceptance of where it's at right now. And we're only beginning to see this is only the beginning of it. So anyway, peace.